Culture Secretary Lucy Frazer has said that the BBC should not be able to prosecute those who do not pay the fee, which is due to rise to £169.50 in April. Take a listen.
I don't think it's appropriate for the BBC to have criminal tools in its armoury in relation to prosecutions. And that is something that I've said I will look at the Charter review. I think that there are issues in relation to criminal prosecutions, especially for those people who are the most vulnerable.
Now, the Culture Secretary previously said that the practice was morally reprehensible, and yet 3,500 people are prosecuted each month behind closed doors. They face not only a criminal record but also fines of up to £1,000. Now, activist group Silver Voices have warned that countless pensioners could have their lives ruined over tiny missed payments, while other campaigners have said that the licence fee effectively criminalises poverty. However, the BBC say that prosecutions is a last resort and previously warned that they would lose more than £1 billion if decriminalising licence fee evasion became something that they did. Oh, Albie, I'm going to start with you on this one. What do you think?
Well, look, everyone would rather things were free in life. I think we can probably say that as a general rule for everyone. We'd all just wish things were free. But things aren't free. Things need to be paid for. The BBC is an organisation. The way that is paid for is through the licence fee. So the question is, if we get rid of the licence fee, or we stop sort of prosecutions for people that don't pay the licence fee, if there's no deterrent, why would anyone pay the licence fee? Why would anyone do that? They wouldn't pay for it. And the BBC needs to raise money in order to pay for the broadcasting it does. Now, what are the other options available to broadcasters? There's advertising revenue, like Channel 5 gets advertising revenue. There are subscription revenue, so Netflix gets subscription revenue from the subscribers that you pay for. And there's also making content and licensing content to other broadcasters. If that's how we want the BBC to make money, then that's what we should do. But taking away a deterrent from the only way that the BBC makes money is not the solution to this problem. It's finding an alternative funding method for the BBC.
I mean, that's fundamentally the problem with decriminalising this, isn't it, Susan? That actually, if you say you're not going to get a criminal record, there's going to be no prosecution, no fines, no nothing. Who would pay it?
Well, other things you have to pay for don't necessarily end up in a case where you could actually go to prison for not paying. You don't go to prison for not paying your licence fee, but you go to prison if you continue not to pay the fines and the fines build up. I think because it's held in magistrates' court as opposed to county court, that's where the difference is. And I don't think any of us were quite as aware of how there's some companies out there could prosecute people until the whole post office scenario came about.
It was quite an eye-opener for everybody.
It was quite an eye-opener that you're allowed to have this what's called a single justice procedure, which is where you can get prosecuted behind closed doors. You don't even have to turn up. You might not even plead, but you could get a criminal record. And that is done without any kind of intervention by police or anybody else. It's just done by the BBC. And I don't think we realised that until we saw what happened with the post office. Clearly that went horribly, horribly wrong.
But this isn't about the post office.
It's not about the post office.
It's about not paying the licence fee.
But we do need to learn lessons from that sort of thing. I think the bigger question is the licence fee justified, and should anybody be paying it anyway? Obviously, I do pay for a licence fee, and I would always pay for a licence fee while I have a television, and while that is the law. I'm not advocating anybody doesn't do that. But I think increasingly, if you're asking for public money and for people to fund the BBC, there are many, many questions that people have about that, about accountability, about the fees they pay for certain things, how they're funded. And again, you say it's not about the post office, but we're always held, the BBC has always been held up. And I've been one of those people who've very much supported the BBC, thinking it is, it makes great programmes and dramas.
What do you have against prosecuting people that don't pay the licence fee?
I think we're hammering the little people and not looking at the bigger picture. That's what I think is happening there. Also, 70% of people prosecuted are women. Why? I want to know more about that. Why is that the case, that women are being kind of unfairly discriminated there in that particular court scenario? But what I was going to say is, you said it wasn't about the post office. The BBC is being held up as this bastion. It's the only place to make these great programmes, and it should be bias-free. I think we can all agree now that that's been proved on occasion not to be true. But look what ITV did with that drama, The Post Office. They're not publicly funded. They don't get the licence fee money, but they made that amazing programme that actually has brought some justice about, which is what the BBC BBC should be doing as well. I'm not saying they don't make good things as well, but it doesn't have to be done through a licence fee. That's what that proves.
Just to be clear, subsequent to the debate on whether you should be able to prosecute people for not paying their licence fee, you actually think we need to look at the licence fee itself and how the BBC is funded? OK. Christine from Middlesbrough, you're up first. What's your thoughts on the BBC being able to prosecute people for not paying their licence? Do you think that's fair?
No, definitely not. I mean, who are the BBC? We've got courts in this land. I don't agree with this at all, and I don't agree that in a democracy, if you don't watch and don't want a certain element or anything to do with BBC, why have you to pay for it? They're saying they're going to lose billions of pounds with all these people not paying, but there must be something. They must get something through their heads. If all these people aren't paying it, it must be because they're not satisfied.
Well, actually,
if you're not satisfied
to
with
be
the
fair,
subject, you don't pay for it.
To be fair, the BBC's response was that the vast majority of households, more than 24 million households, pay the fees absolutely fine, and their prosecutions have went down 66%. So that doesn't sound too bad. But I'm picking up, Christine, that actually not only do you have an issue with having to pay the licence fee whether you consume BBC products or not, but actually the fact that they are able to prosecute in these sort of single justice procedures, is that what you have an issue with? Because that was your first comment.
That's definitely what I have an issue with. Who do they think they are?
Well,
they're a broadcasting firm. If you want to watch it, watch it. That's your privilege. That's your prerogative. I don't watch it. I'm 75. I don't have to pay a licence anymore. I've paid it all my life. I've begrudged every penny because I don't watch it. I'm not interested in it. Why am I paying for something? I'm not a hard-up pensioner. I'm on basic. But there's people out there who are scrimping for food and the BBC are prosecuting them. It's absolutely disgusting. The BBC makes thousands and thousands. They give like Lineker, I don't mean to bring him into it, but I mean...
But you have.
It was always going to happen.
And they're taking it off a poor woman who can't afford a loaf of bread to feed the children. It's a disgrace.
But Christine, I think the question that Albie brings up is that things cost money. If you're not going to pay for it, then there has to be some sort of consequence to that. Otherwise, nobody will pay for it, and then the BBC will no longer exist. Would you mind that happening?
Well, a lot of people wouldn't, because BBC is, valued by a lot of people, and good on them. But when you're not watching it or something, you're not using the project.
Well, I suppose
why is the law saying you have to pay for it?
Even if you're not watching it, Christine, you might be having some of the benefits of the BBC. For example,
like
local radio.
Well, local radio now isn't local radio. BBC have rolled back.
I don't watch it. I don't listen.
Well, even if you did, Christine, you would find it.
I'm watching BBC. Channel 5 now. That's my choice. I don't have a choice with BBC. They say, watch us, don't watch us, but I still want your money. It's a disgrace.
The problem Christine's got is if she did want to listen to local radio, they've now rolled back so far that your local radio is not made locally, it's not presented locally.
But they've rolled it back because they think people don't want it. They've rolled it back because each year the government has limited the increase in the licence fee which happens, which means a real terms cut to the BBC's budget.
So the one thing that the BBC should stand for and should do is
the service is going down. The reason the service is going down is because there's not enough money going into the system. So you should actually be arguing in favour of the licence fee rising with inflation every year if you're upset about local radio.
Well, again, it's like everything you look at, though, isn't it? It's always the little people who have to pay all the money. And actually, there's a lot of money in there. I mean, I wasn't going to bring Lineker up, but Christine went there. But there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of ways that the BBC is wasting money and having more resources. I've worked in independent news nearly all my life, and every time I ever turned up to do anything, I'd turn up, there would be me and a camera person, and the BBC team would have 6 people. It was always the case. They were always overstaffed for everything, that everything was done more commercially.
But does that mean that the BBC's quality is higher? Because some would argue that the BBC is the apex, is what you're looking for.
But you could argue that on some things and argue that on others. I don't know. Is EastEnders better than Coronation Street? I don't think so. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with EastEnders. Strictly Come Dancing is a fabulous programme. Are the production values on The Masked Singer any worse? No. Look, you can't say the BBC is so high above everybody else now. should have been maybe for a while, maybe it was for a while, but now I don't think so. And now I think you have to, and also it's the accountability as well. I think this is where they get into a whole lot of trouble, where they're kind of penalising people, like, you know, and Christine's saying she's not even watching it, but what she might not be watching the programmes, but she will have heard of the situations with the case with Martin Bashir or Jimmy Savile. Where are the people who've been made to pay for what's
Susan,
gone on in that industry?
There's a perfectly reasonable debate to be had about how we fund the BBC, whether or not we get it through advertising and subscription revenue or from licensing content. But whilst we have a BBC licence fee, don't you think there needs to be some sort of deterrent to ensure that people pay for it?
Yes, I understand your point there, and I understand, and I would always pay it. So I'm not somebody who would ever get dragged into that kind of court. But at the same time, not everything that you have to pay ends up in a magistrate's court punishable by
but if you
going
don't
to
pay
jail
the licence
situation.
fee, but you watch TV, isn't it theft?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up theft, because when you compare it to, for example, shoplifting, where you won't get prosecuted if you steal something for under £200.
Yep.
Well, this is under £200.
That's a very
and so
good point.
why are we prosecuting people that aren't paying the licence, but we won't prosecute somebody for stealing
It's sledgehammer
£199
pounds
worth of goods
Look,
from
I
the
think
supermarket?
we need to have tougher criminal sanctions for all sorts of crimes. So all that would make me think, Storm, is that actually for people that steal things under £200 from a shop, they should be prosecuted in the same manner.
OK, Amanda from Bedfordshire, what's your thoughts?
Oh, hi. Yeah, first of all, I want to say I think this programme is brilliant. I watch it every day. It's really good. Yeah, it's a really interesting programme. And, my point, I totally agree with the last lady. I think the TV licence is so expensive. You know, we have the other channels. We don't have to pay for them. I would say bring in the adverts. If we can get free TV licence through bringing in adverts, do that.
Is there a risk, though, Amanda, if we bring in adverts, then that unbiased culture, that unbiased nature of the BBC could drift away?
I don't know. It's hard, really, to say. It could do, but I don't know. I think it's just penalising people, because obviously there's some people that can afford this. There's some people that can't. I think bringing in criminal charges is just wrong, because I think there's so many more serious crimes that are going on in the world. You know, to have a criminal charge over a TV licence, I just think that's awful. I mean, OK, fair enough. If you don't pay for something, it's wrong. But to have a criminal charge, I just think that's just blowing it out.
I wonder whether, Amanda, you would feel it was fair if we kept the criminal charges and the prosecutions and the BBC's ability to do that behind closed doors swiftly and easily, but we made more exceptions for people who didn't have to pay the licence. So pensioners wouldn't have to pay the licence. Stay-at-home parents maybe don't have to pay the licence. People that are housebound for long periods of time, people with disabilities wouldn't have to pay the licence, those on particularly low income. So it's almost means tested in terms of the payments that you have to make.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that would be a possibility.
A middle ground?
I mean, me personally, I mean, I work, I go out to work, I work part-time, but I still, when that bill comes through the door, I dread it, because there's so many expensive things that you're having to pay in life. It's just, you just think, where do you draw the line? But yeah, I mean, that is a possibility, yeah. But
particularly at the moment, everyone's bills across the board are going up, and this is just another one to add to the list.
Yes, exactly. That's what you think. But I just think for them, you know, for it to keep going up and up and up every year, I don't know. I just think it's all wrong, really. It's just, I just think it needs to be reviewed. I really do. And, you know, it's not like the BBC don't get enough money. I mean...
Well, apparently they don't, Amanda, you know, surprisingly enough. And I think that will shock a lot of people, because they are already making cuts.
What we're hearing from people calling in is they don't feel they're getting value for money.
Yes.
That's the problem, I think, that they've got, really.
People on social media have been getting in touch. Julie on Facebook says, I'd rather go to jail than pay it. You can watch TV in other countries for free. Make it a subscription. Well, subscription seems like a very popular choice. Jazz on Twitter says, maybe critics would be happy with other public services being pay as you use, like the health service or armed forces. Oh, interesting. It funds many more products than just BBC One. Once gone, good luck with the US streaming picking up the slack. So Jazz actually makes maybe a fair point there, Susan, that we need a broadcaster like the BBC. They are seen, the BBC is so respected globally.
Yes.
And it is seen as in terms of news and output, is like the pinnacle to look up to. It would be sad, to see it go.
It would indeed. I wouldn't want to see the BBC go, and I do think that which has a very good reputation. But now, with various things that have been going on, I think sometimes it's a bit unwarranted, and I think it's living on its legacy and not actually bringing itself up to speed in the way it should do. And I think if it's going to continue to take the licence fee, and I'm not necessarily arguing for it to go, but I do think it needs looking at, then I think it has to...
When you say it needs looking at, I mean, what solution do you want? Because everyone says they want to look at the licence fee, but then ultimately, when they do look at it, they conclude that the licence fee is the most sensible way of collecting money for the BBC. So what do you want the outcome of looking at it to be?
Well, I think the outcome should be that if you are going to take that money, then you have to be able to be more accountable. You have to be able to kind of take things to the investigations that go on that never gets resolved about certain issues that the BBC have really had. I mean, terrible things that have gone on in the name of the BBC. And I'm thinking about, the Jimmy Savile case, and I'm thinking about Martin Bashir and the interviews with Princess Diana, and no one has been brought forward to kind of be made. Heads have not rolled over that, and they should. And we're talking about it as being unbiased. Is it unbiased? Is it as any less unbiased than anywhere else? I can't. We could sit here for ages and think of all the evidence.
That would be another debate.
That would be a whole other debate we don't want to get into.
James from Mid Glamorgan, what's your views on the BBC and its ability to prosecute those that don't pay the licence fee?
Now, Storm, I think this is an antiquated, old-fashioned tax. It's the 21st century now. People are getting punished for watching television, and the closed doors, which is a wrap-up seal, you're guilty, and the fines and imprisonments, is an absolute travesty. The BBC needs to understand one thing. It is like Blockbusters. You're gone. We don't want you anymore. We don't want to pay for you, and we don't want to watch your programme. You need to stand now, like everybody else does, with your output. Do people watch it? If they don't watch it, that means people don't want it. It's as simple as that.
So you would go subscription. The problem is with subscription, not everyone's going to pick it up. Then the BBC will
But that's
get
good,
even less
because
funding.
then the BBC will now understand, Storm, what it's like to be in a private marketplace.
Yes, but do we not want a broadcaster that stands apart from that? Do you want to get your news from Netflix? Do you want to get your news from Amazon Prime? Or do you want to get your news from the BBC?
We probably have more reliable news from Netflix and Amazon than we do from the BBC, because it's not unbiased, it has an agenda, and it has an agenda since Brexit. We, the working people, have had enough of the BBC. If the middle class want to go and pay for it, that's fine, because we don't want to pay for this anymore. You stand on your legs. If it's rubbish, people won't watch it, and the majority of people are not watching it.
Thank you very much for your call. Nigel from Cornwall, what's your thoughts on the ability of the BBC to prosecute people that aren't paying this licence fee?
Well, I think it's a waste of money. I'll tell you what happened to me some years ago. I moved into a flat. It must be about 14 years ago now. And as soon as I moved in, I paid my TV licence. Anyway, I kept getting letters, regularly, must have been every month, I weren't paying my TV licence. So I rang up numerous times, and the gentleman or the lady on the other side, OK, sir, we'll get this sorted out. And you could hear them tapping on the keyboard. And letters carried on coming for 2 years, believe it or not.
Oh.
Yeah, honestly.
So what had happened?
Next thing, I had a letter come through for a court appearance. So I thought, well, I'm going to bother attend because I got a licence anyway. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I didn't attend the course, and about 2 weeks later, I had a letter again for a court appearance. And like I said, I didn't bother attending. No, sorry, I made a mistake. I had a letter 2 weeks later saying I'll have a visit from the officers. Anyway, they came, of course, and I just produced my TV licence.
OK, and what happened?
I said, oh, sorry, sir, we're very sorry we've come to see you. I said, well, this has been going on for 2 years. And the thing is, they sent all these letters, and they said they'd sorted it out every time. But they hadn't. And
well, also, Nigel, that must have been very worrying, because actually, had they prosecuted you in your absence, I don't know if they could do that, actually, but you would have a criminal record. And so that would be absolutely terrifying, not something you want to have to deal with at all, and very hard, I think, to probably roll back on, as we see in the post office scandal. Nigel, thanks for telling us that story. Probably a warning to lots of people out there to just make sure that their payments are going through. Thank you for your call. Louise from Rotherham, what's your view on the TV licence?
I think it's quite unfair, and I think it's outdated. I mean, as I've just been saying to your researcher, my mum is 87, so she had a free TV licence. Mm-hmm. Pensioners who had a free TV licence now have to pay again, but my mum is blind. So she can't actually see the television. She has to listen to the television.
But
you still...
Louise, first of all, she should get a concession for that. I think that you...
No, she does, yeah. So she gets a concessionary licence, but nonetheless, you're paying half the licence.
But Louise, that's part of this whole argument, is the BBC isn't just BBC One, the BBC isn't just TV, it's radio too, which is something that your mum would probably...
But she doesn't listen to him.
But that's not really the point of the BBC and the licence, which is why so many people are so anti it on the phones, I suppose, today, is that it doesn't really matter what part of the BBC you consume. The fact that you're consuming any of it or the general public are benefiting from its existence means that we have to pay the licence fee to contribute to those productions, that research. Do you think that's fair? I suppose it's a sort of tax in order to have a broadcaster like the BBC.
I think there's a difference between having a tax on, I mean, if it was, let's say it's a publicly funded state broadcaster and you pay for it through your tax, that's a different thing. Yeah. Prosecuting people, you could end up with someone like my mum being prosecuted and sent to prison. And I think that's very unfair when people have had a licence that was free, it's then been reimposed on them. You may have people with dementia, for example, who've got no idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
How to do it.
You would really hope, I don't think you can go to prison, but you would really hope that somebody with dementia wouldn't be prosecuted for forgetting to pay their licence, or, you would hope common sense.
Depends what the computer says, though, doesn't it? That's your problem. It depends on who's tapping on that keyboard and what the computer tells them.
True.
That's as we've found, is how things happen.
True. Louise, thank you very much for your call and your story there. Thanks for all your calls on this, and not very many people in favour of the licence, it would have seemed this morning.